Your body contains 10 times more bacteria than human cells. But how are these bacteria impacted by human made EMFs? You're listening to the 2025 EMF Hazard Summit. My name is Nick, the EMF guy Pinot, and this is the EMF Hazard Summit, Protect Your Children. In this presentation, Dr. Marco Ruggiero reveals how the microbiome, also known as the second brain, is impacted by wireless radiation. He also describes how he was able to engineer a unique supplement that can help increase the body's internal protection against all forms of radiation. Dr. Ruggiero, MD, PhD, is an inventor and researcher who published more than 240 scientific articles so far. His research interests are in immunotherapy, quantum biology, and microbiome medicine, and is to this day one of the most fascinating scientists I've had the chance to interview. Let's dive in. Hello, this is Nick Pino. I'm here for the 2025 EMF Hazard Summit. My guest today is Dr. Marco Ruggiero, and he's talking to me directly from Asia at the moment. So I know you're a world traveler like me, and you're always up to something new. One thing in particular that I wanted to chat about today is how EMFs might impact our microbiome. This is not something we hear about from scientists, but something you told me years ago. And let me know if that's still the case. You told me that, according to you, one of the primary impact of EMFs from devices such as Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or laptops or cell phones, it's the impact that it has on our microbiome, including, of course, the microbiome of our kids. Is that still your understanding?
Well, it's not only my understanding, but now this has become part of the common scientific consensus. For those who are not aware, and I think very few people are not aware of this, but for those, let me briefly speak about what we mean with the term microbiome. Mm-hmm. Now, if we count the number of human cells in our bodies, we end up with a certain figure. But we know that we have microbes in our gut. Once it was called the gut microflora. Now we know that we have microbes on our skins, on our airways, and even microbes inside our brains. And they're there to stay. They perform a function. Now, if we count the number of microbial cells in our bodies, we end up with a figure that is 10 times as high than the number of human cells. So, if we look at the cell numbers, we're only 10% human. Actually, there was a book written a few years ago entitled Only 10% Human. But that's only the tip of the iceberg, because if we count the human genes in our DNA, we end up with roughly 22,000 genes. Not too many, honestly. In the past, we thought that we were more complicated, but actually only 22,000 pieces of information is what are needed to make a man, or a woman, of course, a human. Now, if we count the number of microbial genes, we end up with a number that is close to the number of atoms in the entire universe, 10 to the 80. So 10 elevated to the 80, 10 followed by 88 zeros. So a number which is unfathomable. I mean, you cannot imagine such a huge number. Maybe the use debt will reach that number, who knows? But up until now, it's a number that only applies to the astronomical scale. So to say that the microbes in our bodies, they perform a number of functions, and most likely we know only a few of them. Now, the microbes, unfortunately, are more sensitive than we are to electromagnetic fields, EMFs. And so when we are exposed to EMFs, like, a common cell phone or the wireless, otherwise we could not communicate between Korea and I don't know where you are. When we are exposed, the damage inflicted onto our human cells is relatively minor. I'm not a big fan of conspiracy theories, and so I can say that when companies state that EMFs are harmless for humans, in a certain sense, they are right, because they are rather harmless for our human cells. They cause some changes, but they're not as damaging like some chemicals or some ionizing radiations like gamma rays or X-rays. They're not so damaging. And they're telling the truth, but they're only telling a part of the truth. Because if it is true that EMFs, the common man-made EMFs are little damaging to human cells, they are highly damaging to the cells of the microbiome. And you may wonder, well, who cares about the microbes? No, we have to care about the microbes, because the health of our microbes, the health of our microbiome is directly associated with our health. As of today, it is well known, well assessed that the number of diseases, not only about the GI tract, which is the most obvious, but also diseases of the immune system, or even diseases of the brain, are associated with alterations of the microbiome, of the resident microbiome. That's why, for example, now antibiotic therapies are used with great caution. When I was a child, I was given antibiotics if I sneezed. Because, we came after World War II, penicillin was thought to be the cure for all diseases. And so everybody was given antibiotics in a truly insane manner. Now, antibiotics, rightly, are given with much more caution, because we know that the damage that we inflict to our microbes reflects on the health of our body. It is of particular importance, the damage that we may inflict to the microbiome of the newborn, or the microbiome of the infant, or the microbiome of the developing human. Now, I'm sure that you are aware that in the past few decades, there has been an exponential growth in the number of neurological, neurodevelopmental diseases in children. Mm-hmm. They can be called in different manners. Usually we refer to them as autism spectrum disorders, or let's talk about autism for short. But actually autism is not one disease. Autism is a spectrum, many different types. Difficult to find two children with the same identical symptoms, even though they can be both diagnosed with autism. And there is ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and a number of other diseases, both in the neurological and also in the psychiatric sphere, that are increasing exponentially. So what has been changing in the past few decades? Well, many things, of course, but the pervasive combination of two factors seems to be responsible for this dramatic increase in the number of children affected by one form or another of neurological, neurodevelopmental, or psychiatric disorder, anxiety in children. So nobody had seen anxiety in children when I was studying medicine. I graduated, I got my MD in 1980. So you can tell how old am I. When I was studying in neurology, a neurology clinic, neurosurgery, psychiatric, and so, autism was not even mentioned, because it was such an irrelevant pathology that there was no need to teach young medical doctors about a pathology so irrelevant, so rare, that it was thought they would never encounter. So it was just like a footnote in the book of psychiatric, more of a curiosity rather than something. Now, different statistics, different calculations, but it appears that 1 in 60 children in the US, but US is not peculiar in this case, because these numbers, they apply to all places in the world, in the Western, Eastern Hemisphere, Northern and Southern Hemisphere. 1 in 60. But if we look at males, it is 1 in 30, and it is on the rise. It is increasing. When I went to school, in my class, there were 30 people, 30 children, and then 30 teenagers. So imagine just 1 autistic person per class, and maybe 2. So this, of course, implies enormous burden on the welfare, on the government, but much, much more on the families, because it's a problem that affects families in a manner that if you don't know them, if you have not been in touch with them, you cannot even imagine. So that's the dramatic condition or situation about autism. And what has the microbiome to do with autism? Well, it is thought that damage to the microbiome is one of the culprits for the exponential increase in autism. And when I say autism for short, I mean all neurological, psychiatric, neurodevelopmental disorders that we observe today. And you may say, okay, but what causes the damage to the microbiome? And here the situation becomes a little more confused because there are many factors. Actually, 2 factors come to play, and they negatively interact with each other. They amplify each other's harmful effects. Exposure to electromagnetic EMFs and exposure to pollutants, toxicants, pollution. Now, since I don't want to waste your time, the time of your audience rambling, I prepared a few slides that are more useful for me rather than for you. So if I may have the opportunity to share the screen,
sure.
I just wanted to. All right, now you
Perfect.
see it full screen.
Yes.
Now, it was 1991, 33 years ago, when it was first discovered. And by the way, I'm showing you papers, articles from PubMed, so not some fringe conspiracy theory blog or website. So I'm talking about the US Government Library of Medicine. This article, I mean, the title says it all. Chronic or intractable medical problems associated with prolonged exposure to unsuspected harmful environmental electromagnetic or electromagnetic fields radiating in the bedroom or workplace. And now comes the important words. And their exacerbation by intake of harmful light and heavy metals from common sources. And think that in 1991, nobody knew what the internet was, or a few people knew what the internet was. Wireless devices, never heard of. Smartphones, never heard of. And there were those old brick-size Nokias or Motorola big cell phones that few people had. But even then, 33 years ago, it was observed that this was a concern. Now, this is a more recent. Ubiquitous, extremely low frequency EMFs induce anxiety-like behavior. But the important point is that they induce anxiety-like behaviors not only in us humans, who may be too sensitive, or sometimes we might be deluded. No, in rats, in mice. So this is something objective. It's not something that comes to some delusional thinking. And here comes the important part as far as children are concerned. And this was published in 2015, so it's relatively recent, electromagnetic fields and brain development. And of course, the effects on the brain development is not a positive one. But now here we have to think that we have 2 arrows pointing to the brain. And don't think about my brain, because my skull is thick and my brain already has developed many, many years ago. It's declining now. But when the brain is developing, the skull, of course, is much, much thinner. And as it makes full sense to understand that if something is in the process of development, is much more sensitive to any negative actor and any negative influence. So EMFs are known to impact negatively the brain development. and this is another article published 2018, how wireless technologies may affect childhood development. Actually, in order to have the paper published, they have to put it under the form of a rhetorical question, how they may affect. But actually, they do affect, and then if you read the paper, you see that they affect. Now, go to Google and simply ask for EMFs and brain development, and you end up with a long list. And of course, I will not go through each one of them. You can do this yourself. Most of these articles are quite easy to understand. If you read the abstract, all the information is there. Then it goes into the technicalities that might be interested only for someone. Now, why is the brain of children more sensitive to EMFs? As I said, simply because it is developing, and during development, a number of things have to happen. A number of neural circuits have to form, others have to be eliminated. So it's a very, very delicate moment, and if you bombard the developing brain with EMFs, you don't do a good job. Plus, there is something very physical. Thickness of the skull. And the thickness of the skull in a 5-year-old is half a millimeter. In an old man, as I am, probably is more than 2 millimeters. And so this is quite physical. The absorption rate, that is the degree of penetration of EMFs, is twice as much in a child. If you want to go into the details, 4.49 watt per kilogram versus 2.93, so almost as much. So it is twice as much the amount of radiation that enters into the brain, for the very simple reason that the skull is thinner. It's simple, I mean, not rocket science here. And this again is not something peculiar to humans, is something that happens in all animals. Because if you take mice, you see that something identical happens, because the development of their brain is affected by EMFs. Now, this is something that I probably have already been said, and the audience maybe at this point might be wonder, why do I say always the same things? But well, because some things are true. The brain generates its own EM field, and this can be measured with the electroencephalography and with the more modern magnetoencephalography. Counting the number of neurons, so we can say that the human brain possesses 100 billion EMF transmitters. The brain is responsible for consciousness. So this is something that tells us how the electric current and the magnetic fields can be measured with magnetoelectroencephalography. But look at this. Probably this, you didn't know this. And many people didn't know this. The electromagnetic field of the brain, like any other transmitter, like my cell phone or like a walkie-talkie, transmits information. And another brain can pick up that information. Am I talking about telepathy? Sort of. But now, again, we are not in some conspiracy blog. We are in a serious paper. Brain-to-brain communication, the possible role of brain electromagnetic fields. Of course, it's an hypothesis, but it's an hypothesis that is grounded in very solid science. And of course, if you disrupt these with all the EMFs that you have around, well, you disrupt this potential way of communication. No telepathy with iPhones around. Now, I will summarize this slide because I don't want to waste too much of your time. EMFs have always existed. We live on a planet that is surrounded by the EMFs. Sunlight is an EMF. EMFs are all around us, and we as humans and all other living beings in this planet, we evolved with EMFs, and actually we participate. EMFs are extremely important in a number of functions. So where is the conundrum? that man-made EMFs are non-natural. Why? Because they are polarized. So this is the main difference between the physiological, natural EMFs that surround us and the man-made EMFs. They are polarized because they have to be polarized, otherwise they would not be able to convey information. So it's something that is done on purpose. But polarization changes completely the response of the human body to EMFs. This is an article published almost 10 years ago. Polarization, a key difference between man-made and natural electromagnetic fields in regard to biological activity. And you can imagine that this difference, this key difference, is not a positive one. The polarization is a trigger that significantly increases the probability for the initiation of nefarious biological health effects. And as you said, we demonstrated together with others that the microbes are sensitive to electromagnetic fields. This article was published in Scientific American. So again, we're talking about the most reputable scientific publications. Bacteria use brain-like bursts of electricity to communicate. So if you disrupt them, they cannot communicate and nothing good for them. And in 2017, in the Encyclopedia of Cancer, Stefano Terini and I published a full chapter demonstrating how probably the damage to the microbes of the microbiome is more relevant, is more important in causing the harmful effects of EMFs rather than the damage to our human cells. This is something I think I've never shown you, but this is something that merits consideration, in my opinion. Written in Swedish, never translated in English, published by Lennart Hardel, who is an eminent Swedish oncologist. List of microwave illness symptoms reported during exposure to supposedly safe levels of 5G radiation in an apartment in Sweden, November 21. You can read for yourself. It's a long list. It would take 10 minutes, and we don't have 10 minutes. A long list ranging from headache to muscle pains, joint pains, fatigue, confusion, hair loss. I mean, hair loss. Hair loss happens when you are under chemotherapy. Hair loss happens when you are under radiotherapy. So not good. So this is a long list, fluctuating body temperature, irritability, emotionally. So it's a long list. You can have it. I mean, you can have all these slides if you like. Never translated in English, who knows why, but fully published in Swedish. And now comes the truly dangerous part, the truly troubling part. If EMFs weren't harmful enough per se, we have to consider that we live in a very polluted environment. No matter where you go in the most pristine alpine retreat, nevertheless, unfortunately, heavy metals, fumes, exhaust fumes of all types, unfortunately, around us. I mean, that's a reality. And when you combine EMFs with toxicants, we call them toxicants, including heavy metals and non-metal toxicants, look what happens. I mean, nobody uses DVDs any longer, but DVDs, they had a film, they had a coat of metals. You put them in a microwave oven and you see what happens, because the discharge of the microwaves, not electricity, the discharge of the microwaves, they interact with the magnetic properties of the metals covering the DVD, and so the DVD is gone. Now, interestingly, 5G uses a portion of the microwave spectrum. Now, this again is not something that I have discovered. This is something that is becoming part of scientific knowledge. This is another article. Rhetorical question. Are rises in electromagnetic fields in the human environment interacting with multiple environmental pollutions the tripping point for increases in neurological deaths? So here we're not talking about autism or other diseases. We're talking about death, neurological death in the Western world. And by the way, I'm on the opposite side of the world. I'm in Asia now. They talk about the Western world because they did the studies over there. But when they do the studies here or in China, the results, unfortunately, are the same. It's not that the Western world has some strange peculiarity. No, we are all humans. So the Western world is not peculiar in this context, and this applies all over the world. May I have 5-10 more minutes?
Sure.
Let's talk now about autism, and let's be careful what we say. By the way, Robert Kennedy now maybe will be in the US government. So if we say something that is inconvenient, hopefully Robert Kennedy will protect us. But let's try to say nothing too inconvenient.
Sounds good.
What is the cause of autism? Nobody knows. Complex interplay of genetic, epigenetic, and environmental factors. I mean, this applies for all diseases, from cancer to immune disease, everything. So the honest answer is we do not know if there is one cause for autism. Most likely, autism, like cancer, is a multifactorial disease. As a matter of fact, I wrote a paper once from neurology to oncology, what have in common autism and cancer? Many things at the genetic level, but let's not be distracted by this. Are EMFs involved in autism? Again, you go to PubMed, don't go to Google, go to PubMed and look for EMFs and autism, and you end up with a long list of papers describing how EMFs, pulse radio frequency, and so on, may affect, actually they do affect childhood development. So the last paper down there are electromagnetic fields in incubators. So think about the incubators. As soon as you are born and you're put in incubators, and of course, because they want to keep you warm, you're surrounded by heat, by heat waves, electrical. Are they a risk factor for autism? So we are talking about something very interesting, because you put a newborn in an incubator because you want her or him to survive. But at the same time, are you doing some damage to her or his brain that will be responsible 3 years later for autism? And this, again, does not apply to humans alone, because in mice who are exposed perinatally, that is around birth, to extremely low frequency EMFs, you see autism-like symptoms. Of course, the autism-like symptoms in mice are different than humans, but they can be easily recognized. And now the minefield. What about vaccines? Because if you go to the Google and you look for vaccines and autism, good luck to orient yourself, okay? That's why I was mentioning Robert Kennedy, because I attended several Autism One conferences when he and I were speaking, not in the same session, and you know, he has a story with vaccines and autism. Robert Kennedy has a story in particular with thimerosal. Thimerosal was used in vaccines as a preservative, and thimerosal contains mercury. And mercury is a very well-known agent for neurological damage. I mean, this had been known for the idea was to inject into the developing body some mercury that we all know causes damage to the brain, might not be a good idea. But I said I try to avoid stepping into any minefield. So whoever is interested in the controversy of vaccinations and autism can find material to read for days. This is something, however, that might have escaped the attention of the censors, whoever the censors are. Published in 2024 in Neurochemistry Research, again in PubMed, we are talking about reputable science. And now we are talking about different type of vaccines, not the MMR. We're talking about COVID-19 mRNA vaccine. If you expose male neonatal rats to the vaccine, you induce autism-like behaviors. So this had escaped the attentions of those who are monitoring what is written in the field of science. So male rats exposed to the COVID-19 vaccine, they develop autism-like symptoms. Take it with a grain of salt, decide what you want to do with this information. Thimerosal. Okay, thimerosal is no longer in vaccines. Mercury is no longer in vaccines. It was eliminated. And so how are vaccines kept preserved? How they don't become contaminated, because that would be terrible. Well, now there is something different. Iron oxide. So this is, again, no conspiracy theory. Go to PubMed, look for iron oxide and vaccine, and you find a number of papers demonstrating that iron oxide is a wonderful preservative. It's good, it works well, and does a lot of good things, up to the point that in the European Journal of Pharmaceutical Sciences, it was written with great enthusiasm that iron nanoparticles as novel vaccine adjuvants. Now, I wish to draw your attention to nanoparticles, like nanoplastics. The more nano you are, the worse it is, because you can deal with a baseball size ball of something, but to deal with something that is the size of nanometers, thousands of micrometers or millions of a millimeter, the body is unable to deal with these things. They are too small for the body, for the cells of the body. And with great enthusiasm, iron oxide or iron nanoparticles as novel vaccine adjuvants. Problem is that probably even the Neanderthal man or the caveman knew that iron has magnetic properties. So if you now expose somebody who is being injected with iron oxide to an EMF, well, you change the properties of these particles, and you have magnetization, you have magnetic resonance, conductivity, heating, and heating inside the brain, not inside the brain, inside the cells of the brain, not inside the cells of the brain, inside the microtubules, inside the subcellular structures, inside the nucleus, inside the DNA, because nano means they go everywhere. And so heating inside the DNA might not be a good idea. And of course, chemical reactions. I mean, it's a ferrous material, it's iron, and iron has magnetic properties. So when you have the combination of these two things, is not good, definitely is not good. Well, glyphosate. Okay, you say glyphosate has no magnetic properties. True. Glyphosate has been linked to autism, cancer. Monsanto paid billions of dollars to try to calm down and to try to repair damage. By the way, glyphosate is absolutely on sale. You go at Home Depot or any other store, you can buy as much as you like. So you may say, well, at least glyphosate, whatever damage it does not interfere with electromagnetic fields. Wrong. Well, this simply was saying that glyphosate is responsible for glyphosates and other pesticides responsible for a number of neurodevelopmental diseases. Glyphosate is so sensitive to EMFs that actually there are strategies using EMFs to remove glyphosate from water. This is an article published in Nature Sustainability. Magnetite nanoparticles are efficient materials for removal of glyphosate from water. You see here, I mean, as if I'm unable to point, sorry, this laptop computer is not the familiar one. In any case, you can see for yourself that they're even proposing to use EMFs to remove glyphosate. So glyphosate is sensitive to EMFs a lot. Okay, let's forget about the slides. We have developed three approaches to tackle this problem. First of all, we cannot get rid of EMFs. I mean, we have cell phones, we have wireless, otherwise our modern society wouldn't survive. Unfortunately, we cannot get rid of all the poisonous chemicals that surround us because they're there to stay. But we can defend ourselves. And we can ask for help the microbes of our microbiome. To this end, I developed three strategies that have been translated into three products that are on sale. One is called Presidium. Presidium in Latin means like fortress. Presidium is based on microbes that, unlike the microbes of the human microbiome, are extremely resistant to the harmful effects of EMFs. Imagine that these microbes, they survive nuclear blasts, they survive a nuclear accident, they thrive in Fukushima and in Chernobyl because, I mean, they evolved in this way. Now, these microbes, they have a name. They're called spirulina or Archospira platensis. We're able to culture these microbes in such an environment in our Swiss laboratories so that we make them resistant to all types of EMFs, whether you are undergoing a CAT scan, a radiotherapy, or you're simply exposed as we are to wireless or 5G. These microbes, they don't care. They're resistant to all types of EMFs in the entire spectrum. Now, problem is that they have to teach us how to become resistant, and they do this by interacting with another series of probiotics that we developed in Switzerland called the Bravo probiotics, and they teach the microbes of our microbiome to become resistant, and then they transfer this resistance to our cells. So I call Presidium like an inner shield. Inner shield because it protects me from the inside. Actually, now that I'm traveling, and it's a 12 hours travel from Arizona to Korea, so I'm exposed to a lot of radiations on the plane because I'm up high in the atmosphere, calculating more or less as if I had a CAT scan. So a lot of radiation. And I'm taking a double dose of Presidium to protect myself. Mm-hmm. So this product that is on sale all over the world protects from the inside using the ability of microbes to sustain the damage inflicted by all types of EMFs. And then the second, and then I stop, property that this product has is that it is able to bind and eliminate toxicants. So it removes cadmium, lead, glyphosate, all these toxicants that amplify the harmful effects of electromagnetic fields. So you have a double mechanism. On one side, protection that is given by the microbes that are inherently resistant to EMFs. On the other side, removal of metals and non-metal toxicants that, as we have seen, amplify the effects of EMFs. By so doing, we are able to protect ourselves, our children if needed, and in this way, we are able to prevent the harmful effects of this deadly combination. I mean, that article talks about neurological deaths. So it's a deadly combination of environmental pollution and classical environmental pollution and EMF pollution. Are those two the causes of autism? I cannot say for certain, but they surely contribute to it. I stop it here. I hope that you will forgive my verbosity, but I hope that you will feel the enthusiasm and also the worry that I have, but the enthusiasm, because finally I know that we can do something, and we can do something well within the framework of mainstream science. So we are not advocating for any extreme measure. No, we can do something well within the mainstream science, exploiting all the good things that mainstream science has taught us thus far. I stop it here, and again, I apologize for being too verbose.
Thank you. No worries. It was very, very informative. And I'm very glad that Presidium now is on sale again. I know for a long time it was not available. There's a new distributor in North America. It's going to be linked underneath the video. So I think that you explained the idea well. And I'll also link to other videos and information you have about the product, because I know you have longer presentations about the product and how it's made. We've had conversations about it. I think it's a very revolutionary idea, and there's a lot of people sent me products in the last several years talking about inner shields. Some of them were simply antioxidants or like glutathione and these type of things. They have a time and place, but Presidium is a completely different approach, and this is really what I liked about it, and it is rooted in science as always. So thank you so much for your presence, Dr. Ruggiero. I know that people will love this information, and thank you for being a guest speaker on EMF Hazards 2025.
It's my pleasure, my honor, and I thank you for this opportunity, and I hope that there will be other opportunities in the near future.
For sure. Stay in touch. Thank you so much. I really hope that you liked this presentation. If you want to take action on what you just heard, you'll find links to everything that was mentioned by our guest speaker right underneath this interview. If you love this summit and want to own the recordings in audio, video, and written form for all of these 2025 interviews, make sure to click the buttons on this page to get the 2025 EMF Pack. This EMF Pack is heavily discounted during the summit launch and for a very limited time. Remember that every purchase supports my work as an independent citizen journalist, as well as the nonprofit partners that are associated with this summit. Thank you for your attention and support, and I'll see you in the next presentation.